Hello and welcome. I'm Geeta Mohan and you're watching India Today Global, the big international story this evening. United States of America has announced sanctions against Russian oil companies, including oil and natural gas purchase. Trump, in a social media post, said U.S. Treasury sanctions major Russian oil companies and calls on Moscow to immediately agree to ceasefire. These tremendous sanctions, as Trump calls them, take effect on 21st of November and could impact India's supply chain as India imports almost 36% of its crude from Russia. Here's a report.
A week after US President Donald Trump's lengthy phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin, which was to be followed by a meeting in Budapest, Trump has jolted global oil markets by announcing fresh US sanctions on Russian oil. Trump has imposed sweeping sanctions on Russia's two largest oil companies, Rosneft and Lukoil, aiming to pressure Putin to end the war in Ukraine. The sanctions are set to take effect from November 21st. The announcement came as the proposed Trump-Putin meeting was indefinitely postponed.
Yeah, it's a good question. Today is a very big day in terms of what we're doing. Look, these are tremendous sanctions. These are very big. Those are against their two big oil companies, and we hope that they won't be on for long. We hope that the war will be settled.
Trump's move comes after European Union approved its 19th package of sanctions against Moscow, and Britain sanctioned Rosneft and Lukoil last week. The step is a major setback for India, which relies heavily on Russian crude. Trump has already imposed a 50% tariff on Indian imports, half of it as punishment for purchasing Russian oil. Russia slammed the sanctions, warning of severe global repercussions.
We see this step as entirely counterproductive, including in terms of signaling in favor of achieving a meaningful negotiated solution to the Ukrainian conflict. If the current US administration follows the example of its predecessors who attempted to coerce or force Russia into sacrificing its national interests through unlawful sanctions, the result will be exactly the same: disastrous from a domestic political standpoint and detrimental to the stability of the global economy.
Trump, meanwhile, reiterated that India had assured him it would stop Russian oil imports, a claim the Indian government has not confirmed.
Well, I think I'll be talking to him about it. I think it's a little bit of a different talk. India, as you know, has told me they are stop. You know, it's a process. You can't just stop it. But by the end of the year, they'll be down to almost nothing. That's a big thing. There was almost 40% of the oil. India, they've been great. Spoke to Prime Minister Modi yesterday. They've been absolutely great.
Sources say Indian state refiners are reviewing their Russian oil contracts to ensure no shipments come directly from Rosneft or Lukoil. Reports also suggest that Reliance Industries, India's largest buyer of Russian oil, is preparing to recalibrate its imports to align with government guidance following the new US sanctions. All eyes are now on India and Russia to see how they respond to Washington's latest sanctions on Russian oil. With Neha Kumari, Bureau Report, India Today.
My colleague Karishma Asudani joins me for more on this. Karishma, interesting that more sanctions being leveled against Russian companies. How would that impact India, given that there is going to be a reduction? And then we'll talk about how a trade deal could be in the offing.
Gita, let's first understand that these both companies, which are two big oil majors, not just of Russia, but actually when it comes to exports to the world, Rosneft and Lukoil, they export about close to 3.1 million barrel per day to the whole world. And let alone if we talk about India, it's about 60% of our imports are from these two companies. And knowing the fact that our oil export intake is about close to, say, Russia gives us about 1.7 million barrel per day. This is going to have a major impact on us. While India's oil ministry has not yet officially commented on this. Reliance and Nayara Energy are two major Indian companies which are highly dependent on these imports, with especially Rosneft. And Reliance also, in fact, has a long-term deal with Rosneft of about close to 500,000 barrels per day, which they've been dealing with a long time. And it's evident that the recalibration will have to be done because it's not just the US, it's the EU and the UK who have put. And knowing the fact that companies can't deal with the exchange in terms of dollar, it makes it difficult for India to also continue their trade with Russia, at
Right.
least at a discounted price.
Right, but also recalibration. These two companies recalibrated, realigned their entire refinery to suit the crude coming in from Ural Mountains, and now they'll have to go all the way back, or at least temporarily halt. That in itself is going to be a huge jolt.
It will be, Geeta, but I think this is such a versatile and a vulnerable situation of how things have been panning out. We'll have to watch out that what will be India's fate in this, because let's not forget that we've been buying discounted crude from Russia, and in case we have to cut down, which is likely we may have to cut down, though we may not have to go until zero, because we do have time until November 21st, and until then, if the banks allow, we'll continue to buy and store as much as we can. And that is what at least a lot of oil analysts have been sharing with me today. But still, that makes it difficult, and it could make will add our import crude bill to about, say, 2 to 3% when if we have to divert our imports.
Right. Also, Karishma, what happens first? And what is your reading in terms of what's happening in the finance and commerce ministries? Whether if a trade deal with what reports suggest a 15% or between 15 and 20% comes first, will that allow us a breather, or likely, which now is not looking as likely, but if there is a meeting between Trump and Putin and a ceasefire, that will give India a breather? What are the scenarios that are being played out in the ministries to see what comes first? How do we align ourselves to ensure that we're not hit hard by Trump?
It's difficult to speculate on a percentage, but I can tell you what is coming in from the power corridors officially. In fact, India's commerce minister today, in his meetings in Germany with his EU counterparts, also gave a comment officially on our relationship with the US. He said that things are going on a positive note, and we are hopeful of the fact, especially with India's trade secretary, the newly appointed trade secretary, Rajesh Agarwal, who was in Washington just last weekend. He's come back with a happy face. That's what we've been told, and looks like things are on a positive note. But the round of negotiation, the sixth round of negotiation, has not yet resumed. So I'd still say we should be cautious on that front. We are very clear, and India is very clear on the fact that we are not letting our sensitive sectors be taken for granted, and that is something that is still on the table. But the bigger concern is going to be on Russian oil. In terms of a hopeful situation that ASEAN could have offered was Prime Minister Modi and President Donald Trump's meeting, which now, of course, does not may not is not going to happen because Prime Minister has decided not to travel. But we're hoping that at least in the background, the negotiations could soon take off, and first tranche of deal could be done well before this year, on the lines of also one with EU.
Okay. The fact that there could be a deal just before the end of the year in itself could be a breather for India, but we'll have to again wait and see how this pans out. This has been a, like you said, very, very volatile situation, not just when it comes to bilateral between India and the US, but also globally. Karishma Asdani, keep an eye on what's happening from the Commerce and Finance Ministry. We'll keep coming back to you. Thank you. Now, European Union leaders held a crucial summit with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, grappling with key debates over long-term financial aid for Kyiv and fresh challenges in rolling out the bloc's controversial migration policy. The meeting came soon after both the EU and the US announced a new round of sanctions against Russia, a move Zelensky welcomed, calling it a vital step toward ending the war. Discussions focused on ensuring unwavering support for Ukraine, with leaders exploring ways to sustain military funding and intensify pressure on Moscow. EU leaders also praised Washington's sanctions, describing them as a significant push toward achieving peace in the region.
I think that, of course, it's more tough sanctions on Russia. 19th package is very important, and of European leaders, of EU, but American sanctions are also very important. This is a good signal to other countries in the world to join the sanctions. You know that not only energy, we need shadow fleet, etc., and continue until Putin will stop this war. So these are decisions very important.
We also are very happy about the signals we get from America regarding the sanctions regarding Russia. I think it's an important sign of strength that we are aligned here.
Meanwhile, China, one of Russia's largest oil importers, sharply criticized the U.S. sanctions, emphasizing that dialogue and negotiation remain the only viable path to resolving the Ukrainian crisis.
对话谈判是解决乌克兰危机的唯一可行出路，胁迫施压解决不了问题。中方一贯反对没有国际法依据、未经联合国安理会授权的。
Speculation over a possible meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Donald Trump has been put to rest after Modi confirmed he will not attend the upcoming ASEAN summit in person in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. In a post on social media, the Prime Minister said he will participate in the summit virtually. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar is expected to represent India in person at the event scheduled from the 26th to the 28th of October. The announcement follows weeks of buzz after Trump, in a Truth Social post last month, said he was looking forward to a meeting with Modi in the coming weeks, sparking talk of a potential bilateral meeting during the summit or on the sidelines of the summit. Prime Minister Modi has been a regular attendee of the ASEAN summit, participating in person from 2014 to 2019. The 2020 and 2021 editions were held virtually due to the pandemic, while he skipped the 2022 meeting. Now, on Statecraft today, we discuss the ASEAN showdown. Why is Prime Minister Modi skipping the in-person meet in Kuala Lumpur while Trump could dominate headlines? Find out what this absence really means for India's Act East policy. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is not packing his bags for Kuala Lumpur. No Air India One, no photo ops, no warm handshake with world leaders, and certainly not a bilateral or a pull aside with Donald Trump, who's expected to dominate headlines at the 2025 ASEAN summit to be held in Malaysia. Officially, Modi has said it is because of the Diwali celebrations, but critics call that a convenient smokescreen. Opposition parties claim the real reason is much bigger: to avoid a Trump ambush. Maybe it is because of Trump, but with US-India trade tensions flaring, Russian oil sanctions biting, and tariffs choking Indian exports, Modi's decision to go virtual might just be to dodge yet another Trump bullet. But at what cost? ASEAN is an important regional bloc for India. So while his absence from an in-person participation has ignited a storm back home and whispers abroad, in a world where optics often speak louder than outcomes, has Trump just managed to trump Modi's ASEAN visit? Hello and welcome. You're watching Statecraft with me, Geeta Mohan. This year's ASEAN, East Asia and India-ASEAN summits in Kuala Lumpur are no ordinary gatherings. The region is tense, trade is fractured, and China's influence is expanding like wildfire through the RCEP Pact, that's the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, a club India famously refused to join. On those sidelines, Trump is expected to hold high-stakes bilaterals, while Xi Jinping's shadow looms over every corridor. Against this backdrop, India's Prime Minister choosing a virtual presence rather than a physical one has raised eyebrows worldwide. Can Act East survive when the Prime Minister doesn't show up in the East? ASEAN's secret sauce has always been neutrality. It talks to everyone, the US, China, India, Russia, while taking sides with no one. That's why it's the beating heart of Asia's diplomacy. The annual summits are where great power rivalries are played out, subtly, politely, but decisively. Missing that table means missing the pulse of Asia. For India, ASEAN is not just another regional club, it's the gateway to the East. Since 2014, Modi has made it a centerpiece of his Act East policy. China is not just attending ASEAN, it's owning it. From infrastructure to trade, Beijing has turned the bloc into its economic playground. The China-ASEAN Comprehensive Strategic Partnership is booming. Trade between the two has crossed $900 billion, and the upcoming ASEAN-China Free Trade Area 3.0 is set to deepen that grip. Since taking office in 2014, Prime Minister Modi has rarely missed an ASEAN summit. Even during the pandemic, he made his virtual presence felt strongly. But 2025 is different. This time, the optics are political and potent. When a leader who champions Act East decides to stay home, it undercuts years of diplomatic groundwork. Southeast Asian countries, ever wary of being caught between the US and China, see India as a stabilizing third pillar. Skipping the summit risks signaling a lower priority, especially when China, Japan, and even Australia are sending their top leadership. For ASEAN nations, symbolism matters. Being present means you care. Being absent, even virtually engaged, means you're distracted. And in the Indo-Pacific, distraction costs influence. In such a climate, a physical meeting with Trump could have triggered more harm than good, especially if the US president decided to lecture Modi on trade or oil in front of global media. Politically, staying away made sense. Diplomatically, it leaves a gap, an ASEAN-sized gap. By choosing to attend the ASEAN summit virtually, Modi risks losing more than just a seat at the table. He risks missing the pulse of a rapidly shifting region. Trade politics that could have helped reset the tariff narrative with Trump and open new bilateral routes may now unfold without India's direct influence. The chance to pitch an Indian alternative to China's RCEP-driven dominance slips further from grasp. Defense cooperation, especially in strengthening Indo-Pacific maritime security, could lose the momentum that only in-person diplomacy generates. And perhaps, most crucially, the optics, the handshake moments, the side conversations, the symbolic reaffirmation of India's Act East commitment will now belong to others. As China's leaders seize the spotlight, Beijing doesn't just walk away with the photo ops, it walks away with leverage. And the United States President Donald Trump announced his upcoming diplomatic trip not just to Malaysia, but to South Korea and Japan as well, highlighting a significant meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping in South Korea. Trump also revealed that he cancelled a planned summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin, citing a lack of progress in diplomatic efforts. "It didn't feel right to me," Trump said, adding that he didn't want a wasted meeting. Trump is optimistic about his upcoming meeting with Xi Jinping, hoping to leverage their discussion to end the Russia-Ukraine war. He plans to discuss energy and oil with Xi, aiming to pressure Russia into negotiating a peace agreement. President Trump further said that he is hopeful that the Chinese president can have a big influence on Putin to urge him to a ceasefire. Meanwhile, China said it was maintaining close exchanges and communication with the United States ahead of the big Xi-Trump meet.
I'm going to see President Xi in 2 weeks, going over to South Korea. We're going to meet in South Korea. We're going to talk about a lot of things. They want to discuss the fact that they're paying 157% tariff. It's a little higher than they thought. And We're doing very well. I think we're going to do well in that negotiation.
Now, a day after Israel's parliament voted on a plan to annex parts of the West Bank, its closest ally and greatest friend, the United States of America, has issued a stern warning. President Donald Trump cautioned that Israel would face serious consequences if it proceeded with the annexation. He's been saying that all along, and now in a latest interview to a magazine, Trump said, and I quote him, "It won't happen because I gave my word to the Arab countries. Israel would lose all of its support from the United States if that happened." Meanwhile, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, who was visiting Israel following the announcement of the Hamas-Israel ceasefire, called the vote a very stupid political stunt, adding that it went against Washington's stated policy opposing West Bank annexation.
Somebody told me that it was a political stunt, that it had no practical significance. It was purely symbolic. I mean, look, if it was a political stunt, it was a very stupid political stunt, and I personally take some insult to it. The West Bank is not going to be annexed by Israel. The policy of the Trump administration is that the West Bank will not be annexed by Israel. That will continue to be our policy. And if people want to take symbolic votes, they can do that. But we certainly weren't happy about it.
Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio also warned that any move toward annexing the occupied West Bank would jeopardize America's efforts to secure lasting peace in Gaza.
I think the president's made clear that's not something we'd be supportive of right now, and we think is even threatening to the peace deals. At this time, it's something that we think it might be counterproductive.
However, the bill now will go before the Knesset's Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee and must pass 3 more readings before becoming a law. At the United Nations, India has delivered a sharp rebuke to Pakistan for disguising cross-border terrorism as a so-called freedom struggle. Calling Islamabad the epicenter of global terror, Indian diplomat Raghu Puri exposed its doublespeak and hypocrisy before the world. So as Pakistan continues to twist UN resolutions, will the world finally call out Pakistan's double game?
A fiery showdown at the United Nations. India has slammed Pakistan once again, this time for trying to glorify cross-border terrorism by calling it a freedom struggle. Speaking at a UN dialogue on countering terrorism, Pakistan's representative Mohammad Javed Ajmal urged nations to distinguish between terrorism and the right to resist foreign occupation. A familiar line, and one India was quick to dismantle.
Pakistan attaches great importance to an international law-based global order that ensures the protection of human rights while countering terrorism. I would like to make a few points. As noted in the report, the definition of terrorism must be consistent with the best practice international standards, including legality. We must therefore distinguish between terrorism and the exercise of the legitimate right of people to resist foreign occupation.
But India's First Secretary, Raghu Puri, hit back, calling Pakistan's statement doublespeak and hypocrisy and the epicenter of global terrorism. He added that Pakistan's doublespeak stands exposed, citing its long record of aiding terror groups that have targeted innocent civilians around the world.
Chair, my delegation condemns yet another futile attempt by a member state to misuse this platform to propagate misinformation and disinformation. The international community stands witness to Pakistan's sponsorship of cross-border terrorism and its use of terrorism as a tool of state policy directed against India. Peddling lies and making false equivalences will not help them achieve their goals, whatever they may be. I reiterate that the Union territory of Jammu and Kashmir was, is, and will always remain an integral part of India. And the only unresolved issue is the vacation by Pakistan of illegally occupied parts of Indian territory of Jammu and Kashmir.
New Delhi also reminded the UN that its comprehensive convention on international terrorism remains stuck for years, blocked by Pakistan and a few allies trying to shield their so-called freedom fighters. At the UN, India's stand was unmistakable. No cause, no claim, and no ideology can justify terrorism. And Pakistan's mask, once again, has fallen. With Rudrashish Kanjilal, Bureau Report, India Today Global.
As President Donald Trump confirmed that the White House's iconic East Wing will be torn down in its entirety, photos of the planned ballroom's model kept in the Oval Office have surfaced. This comes days after the president first announced his plans for a huge $300 million ballroom. After photos of Trump's ballroom model surfaced, social media users quickly pointed out that the new structure is much bigger than the White House's main building. Trump told reporters that he decided to dismantle the East Wing after consulting architects that really knocking it down was preferable to a partial demolition. This will include First Lady Melania Trump's office and several other key parts of the wing. The president added that the new 90,000 square foot ballroom will have a capacity of 1,000 people and is needed to host large state dinners and other events that currently have to be held in a tent. Meanwhile, the National Trust for Historic Preservation warned the administration about the new construction, which certainly does not have the agency's clearance. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of India Today Global, but there's a lot more on our YouTube channel. India Today Global's YouTube channel has a lot of international stories. You can log on to the channel, subscribe to the channel, and get all the stories first on this channel. Thank you so much for watching India Today Global. Stay tuned to India Today for all the latest news and updates. Goodbye and take care.